It feels like we're just drowning in information online, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But actually getting a real sense of what people feel, like the mood of the crowd, that seems harder than ever.
It really does. It's like more noise doesn't necessarily mean more clarity. Sometimes it's just the opposite.
Exactly. Which brings us to what we're diving into today. It's this project called Read the Room, RTR for short.
Ah, yes, the sentiment mapping platform idea.
Right. They're pitching it as a way to map sentiment in real time. So our goal here is to unpack what it's all about based on, what the creators themselves have put out there.
So we're looking at the blueprint, basically, the ideas, the goals, how they see this thing working to, well, read the room of humanity, I suppose.
Yeah, and their mission statement is pretty direct. Capture, summarize, and display aggregated and anonymized responses to community questions. They even call it a vibe check for humanity. Kind of catchy, actually.
It definitely sticks. But it's important, like you said, they're upfront that the current users, not exactly a representative sample of everyone.
No, not at all. They call it a fun social experiment right now, so keep that in mind.
Good context.
For this deep dive, we've gathered stuff from their website, some internal presentations, basically descriptions of the platform, the thinking behind it, how it got started, and where they hope it goes.
Okay, so we're getting the inside track on their vision and the mechanics of it all.
And the big question we're sort of wrestling with is, could this RTR thing genuinely give us a new way to understand what people are thinking and feeling online? And, what are the key ideas driving it?
Let's start with the problem then. What gap are they actually trying to fill?
Well, fundamentally, it seems to be this lack of a quick, reliable way to just see the overall human sentiment, like a global mood ring, almost.
Yeah. Despite all the chatter, there's no single dashboard for, the collective vibe.
Right. And you often feel like the loudest voices, or maybe the most extreme ones, get all the attention online. It's hard to know if that's what most people are actually thinking.
Mm-hmm. That feeling that maybe what you see on the news or hear from politicians doesn't quite capture the full picture of public opinion.
Definitely. And RTR also brings up this whole issue of, how our data is used online now.
Ah, the corporate data collection angle.
Exactly. Most of it's gathered by companies, right? For profit. Not necessarily to, help us understand each other better or for our well-being.
And RTR wants to flip that script. Their whole pitch is about democratizing that insight. People choose to share their opinions, often in style.
And then the results aggregated, anonymous, are open for everyone to see, giving the power of that data back to the people, essentially.
Which logically flows into their core values, right?
Right.
Transparency, openness, trust. That seems to be the bedrock.
Totally. They're really open about their privacy policy. They say they only collect what's absolutely necessary. Things like a random username, the site or community you're on within RTR, and which questions you've seen or answered.
Right, mainly for functions stopping you seeing the same question twice, letting you track your own stuff.
And crucially, what they don't collect. They specifically say they don't track how you answered any question or link your current session to past ones.
That no tracking of specific answers is huge for the anonymity part.
Yeah, anonymity is clearly central. They argue it's needed so people feel safe expressing views that might be, less popular or mainstream. They use this analogy, like animals hiding in a herd.
Oh, interesting. Safety in numbers online.
Kind of. The idea is anonymity provides that cover, letting people be more honest without worrying about, backlash or being judged. Makes you wonder if that digital herd could actually surface more authentic feelings.
It's a compelling hypothesis, definitely. Does removing identity pressure lead to more truthfulness? So, okay, how does it actually work? The basics.
All right, so when you answer, it's linked to a specific site, and the site seems to be like a community or group using RTR.
Okay.
Then, if a question gets answers from people across multiple sites, RTR creates these response maps, visuals showing how the answers break down.
Ah, so it's not just one giant global average. You can potentially see differences between these different communities or sites, more nuance.
Exactly. And you can also filter your view to just see stuff from your local site, like what people in your immediate RTR group are asking and answering.
Makes sense. What about bad questions? Or, offensive stuff, how do they handle that?
It seems to be mostly community-driven. If a question's poorly worded or just bad, the advice is don't answer it. The idea is unpopular questions just fade away, they drop down the list.
So passive filtering through lack of engagement.
Pretty much. Plus, there is a report button for stuff that's clearly offensive, so users can flag things for review, a kind of self-policing layer.
Okay, relies on the users then. Now let's get into the why. What really sparked this? The founders' motivation.
The source material points pretty strongly to the founders' frustration with online polarization, specifically mentioning the period around the Gaza conflict in October 2023.
Yeah, that intense period. You can see how that would highlight the problem.
Totally. They talked about feeling disheartened by all the generalizations, the lack of nuance online, just echo chambers, maybe.
It taps into that wider feeling, I think. Just exhaustion with the online shouting matches where balanced views seem to get lost.
And the founder felt it was genuinely hard to figure out how people really felt underneath all that noise. There was also this mention of growing distrust in whether social media platforms or even news outlets were truly neutral.
Right, that skepticism seems key. So the goal was to build a tool to get diverse, anonymous opinions together, a counterbalance to potentially biased info streams.
Trying to get a clearer picture, foster understanding, maybe add to a more complete story.
So how did that frustration turn into, well, an actual thing? What's the origin story?
It's actually kind of cool. The very first spark was apparently just a casual hangout in 2023. An idea for an anonymous polling game, just for friends.
Oh, really? Low-key start.
Super low-key.
Hey.
Apparently, it didn't get much traction initially, but then one friend, Janae, just made a super basic version, like sticky notes and a laptop kind of basic. Love that.
And surprisingly, people really got into it. Just anonymously asking and answering questions. It showed there was maybe something appealing there.
That little spark.
Yeah. And that led to the more formal start at a McGill Physics Hackathon in November 2023. The founder and 3 other grad students, Brendan McGinnis, Nicholas Costello, Cheyenne Hashishemi, built a prototype. They were kicking around names like Litmus Pulse and Fikra Mosaic then.
Oh, wow, hackathons can really accelerate things.
Yeah.
From sticky notes to a working prototype pretty fast.
Right, and it didn't stop there. After the hackathon, they got it running online, started testing it with more friends, using QR codes at parties and stuff. The mapping feature actually came later.
Ah, so it evolved.
Yeah, and the sources credit a bunch of other people who jumped in after the hackathon. Suad Al-Karousi, Naila Al-Karousi, Olivier Date, Hussein Al-Abri, Chris Ross, Janae Fox again, helping with back-end stuff, adding features. Really sounds like a group effort.
Definitely a collaborative build. What about the logo, the chameleon? Is there a story there? There is. It's meant to symbolize 2 things. One, the camouflage, obviously, relates to the anonymity RTR provides. Hiding in plain sight, kind of.
Makes sense.
And 2, the color changing also represents gauging sentiment, showing the different shades of opinion within the platform.
Clever. A visual nod to both anonymity and sentiment analysis. So where is RTR now? How many people are actually using it?
Okay, so right now it's a live web app. They call it a social entertainment platform. One presentation from early 2024 mentioned around 10 daily users, maybe 135 Instagram followers.
Pretty small beginnings.
Yeah, very early days.
Yeah.
A more recent source suggests maybe around 150 users total now. So it's live, it works, but still building that initial user base.
Got it. Still in the incubator phase.
Exactly. They do have some privacy-friendly analytics running. Showed something like 100 visitors, 300 views in the last month. Most traffic, it's direct or from links, Instagram. And interestingly, 68% is from mobile.
Mobile-first audience definitely tracks with broader trends. What about the future? What's on the roadmap? New features? Are they realistic about challenges?
They've got some interesting stuff planned. Word clouds for analyzing text answers with profanity filters, importantly. Interactive word clouds, too.
Okay, moving beyond simple polls.
Yeah, also histograms for visualizing data, sliders for rating things instead of yes, no, and then the necessary stuff like mod tools, admin controls for managing it as it grows. Seems like logical steps to make it more powerful.
Sensible additions. And are they acknowledging the tough parts?
It seems so. They've talked openly about, the potential difficulties of working with friends and family on something intense like this.
Always tricky.
And they're clear that while it's volunteer run now, people need to pull their weight. They even mention maybe delisting contributors who go inactive. Pretty pragmatic.
Shows they're thinking about sustainability, even with volunteers.
Long term, they have big ambitions. Register as a charity in Canada, a nonprofit in the U.S. The idea for revenue later on is charging organizations for analytics or data access.
But keeping the public site free.
Right. The public site stays free. And the really big dream, using AI or LLMs down the line to automate sentiment analysis, maybe even help orgs find compromises based on the data.
Wow, okay. That's ambitious.
Very. But they admit that's way off. First, prove the concept works on a smaller scale with the public data. They also know teamwork needs to be solid now before even thinking about commercial stuff, and they flagged that server costs will likely go up. Seems like a measured outlook.
Grounded in reality while still having that big vision. Good balance.
Now, you mentioned the Fediverse connection. What's that about and why is it relevant?
Yeah, this was interesting. The Fediverse, short for Federated Universe, is this whole collection of decentralized social media platforms. Think Mastodon, Blue Sky, PixelFed, alternatives to the big guys like Facebook or Twitter.
Right, the move towards more open, less centralized social media.
Exactly. And the connection is, apparently, these Fediverse platforms don't really have a good built-in cross-platform tool for anonymous polling that works with their tech, like ActivityPub or the AT protocol.
Ah, a gap in the market, so to speak. Precisely. So RTR could potentially slide into that niche. Offer a privacy-first anonymous sentiment tool that integrates well with these growing decentralized networks. It could be a really smart place for them to find an audience.
That makes a lot of sense. Becoming the go-to polling option for people specifically choosing these more decentralized, maybe more privacy-aware platforms.
Yeah.
Strategic. Beyond just measuring feelings, what else are they hoping to achieve with RTR? Broader goals.
Well, several things came up. One is just simply helping people learn from each other by seeing different viewpoints anonymously.
Exposure to other perspectives.
Right. Then developing a genuinely useful platform to understand the nuances of sentiment. Not just who's loudest, but where there might be common ground, paths to compromise. Ties back to that initial frustration with polarization.
So fostering understanding, not just division.
And then more practically, gaining experience building this kind of thing, having a public contribution log.
Yeah.
And they explicitly say having fun doing it. Sounds like a passion project, too.
Definitely comes across that way. How are they planning to actually do all this? What's the game plan?
Seems pretty organized, actually. They talk about dividing up tasks, using issue trackers, focusing on key priorities right now.
Like what?
Like getting that word cloud feature built, migrating their database, just general upkeep and documentation, which is always important but often overlooked, and maybe creating private rooms within RPR eventually. It sounds methodical.
Good structure, especially for a volunteer team. So who do they see actually using this, the market for RTR, and why now?
They cast a pretty wide net for potential users. Governments, businesses, grassroots movements, influencers, media, researchers. Basically anyone who wants to understand public sentiment without the usual baggage.
And the anonymity and nonprofit status is probably key to attracting that wide range.
Absolutely. They think now's the time because, well, the tech is all there. It's feasible. And they have this interesting idea about RTR potentially finding these underlying meta-axes of opinion, even figuring out a sort of median voter position on issues.
Whoa, okay. Using the data to find consensus points. That could be powerful for, say, policymaking.
Exactly. Could help find compromises, maybe make democracy a bit more efficient.
Yeah.
It's a big idea, but interesting.
Very. Now, they chose to be a nonprofit. Why specifically that route?
It really comes down to trust and neutrality. They feel being a nonprofit signals they're not just profit-driven, unlike commercial platforms.
And being independent of government avoids perceived bias, too.
Right. That neutrality, they argue, is essential for people to trust the data. And that trust opens up more uses for the platform and helps it grow based on its mission, not just the bottom line.
Makes perfect sense for what they're trying to build. How are they funding it now, and what's the plan long term?
Right now, it's donations, like Wikipedia, basically.
Yeah.
They said current server costs are pretty minimal, like $300 a year, because it's mostly volunteer work.
Wow, very lean.
Yeah. They did recently ask for about $10 in donations, specifically to cover social media advertising, trying to get the word out.
Okay, starting to scale outreach.
Looking ahead, the plan is still that nonprofit model, but maybe charging organizations for access to the aggregated analytics and data, possibly some localized ads for grassroots groups too. But the core site for users stays free.
So users get the benefit, orgs who need the deep data help pay the bills. Seems workable. What about their broader growth plans?
Big one is platform expansion. They really want a native iOS app. They think push notifications and a dedicated app experience will boost engagement. Plus, tap into that big iOS market, especially in the US.
Makes sense. And reaching more people.
Yeah, big social media push planned. Beyond just Instagram, they want to be on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, and really lean into those decentralized platforms, Bluesky, Mastodon, connecting back to that Fediverse idea.
Smart to target those specific communities.
Definitely. And they've noticed what works now, funny posts. Stuff that encourages group interaction seems to get the most traction. They do acknowledge needing more funding for that iOS app and for actual marketing help to grow faster.
So Moving from organic growth to more strategic marketing. Makes sense.
Okay, wrapping up. What are your final thoughts on RTR's potential?
Well, the vision is certainly ambitious, trying to bridge that gap between, like, our individual feelings and the big, messy democratic world using tech.
Hmm.
They're definitely riding that wave of decentralization, people looking for alternatives to big tech. And the nonprofit, Wikipedia-inspired model is key for building that trust they need. It feels like a living platform trying to figure out the collective pulse. They know they need help, like with advertising, which is honest.
Yeah, it feels like a more human-centric way of thinking about data online, doesn't it? Which is kind of refreshing.
And the founder really hammers this point. RTR wants to reverse the usual information asymmetry online, give users access to open, anonymized data, like Wikipedia gave access to knowledge.
That's a powerful comparison.
Ultimately, though, as they say themselves, it's still a social experiment, an invitation, really. If you're curious about what people are really thinking, maybe check it out.
So, for anyone listening who's intrigued, the place to go is Read the Room. You can see what's being asked, how people are responding, maybe even jump in yourself.
Yeah, be part of building this thing, potentially. See if it works.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this deep dive on Read the Room. We've looked at this really novel platform trying to give us real-time insights into collective sentiment. Uses anonymous community questions and answers.
And it's built on principles of transparency, privacy, aiming for that nonprofit model as a clear alternative to how big tech handles data.
It's definitely still early days, still growing its community, but there's real potential there, especially maybe in those new decentralized online spaces we talked about.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Imagine if we actually did have a reliable, real-time vibe check for humanity. What would that mean? How might that change how we understand each other, how we make decisions together, how we tackle problems?
Something to think about. We definitely encourage you to check out Read the Room if you're curious, and maybe even become part of this ongoing experiment.